Welcome back to the channel. Today we're back down with the freeze dryer, as we have done a couple other videos of sharing some food adventures that we are trying out. I'm always happy to be back down with the freeze dryer to share the new and old familiar favorites that we are doing in the freeze dryer. One of those trays happens to be our overflow pineapple tray from our tropical cycle that we did a few videos back. Also, in addition to freeze drying today, we will be checking and making sure that our cleaning is up to date. We'll be wiping down the outside of the freeze dryer, making sure it's dust free, doing a little check inside to make sure that we don't have any, we'll call them floaters, or just debris of food in there, because every time you run a cycle, the more and more you run it, the harder and more condensed that spill or whatever it is will become, and will be harder to get out. So we'll be checking to make sure we're not dealing with any of that. And also, one thing that I did not share when we did our cleaning and maintenance, and that was because Brad kind of handled it, but behind the scenes for me, is the 5-gallon bucket that we use. It's not something that I normally put on camera because it's kind of gross, and it doesn't happen when we're doing our cycle naturally, the progression of that, because you kind of deal with it after the cycle is over, like a day or two later. So a lot of times I forgot about it, and just water kept adding and adding, and it got kind of gross, and I got kind of lazy with that. So Michael, this year around with our cycles of freeze drying that we'll be doing, is to dump it at the beginning of the next cycle we do. If you're not familiar with freeze drying, you can't dump your bucket immediately because the ice would not be melted from inside. So you have to wait probably 24 hours, I would say, for everything to thaw out and make it through that hose naturally. And obviously, I know you can do a defrost on the machine, but I don't like doing that. It doesn't flow well, and we did have a leak situation. Whether that was just a fluke or whatever, I just prefer doing it this way, and it works with our schedule a lot. So anyways, we will add that to our repertoire of handling and doing our freeze drying. And at this point, we'll move over to the freeze dryer to start that cool down process. I'll get the food and show you what it looks like before going in today. We have another microfiber towel, so I'm just going to wipe the top of it and the sides. Now that we have our door open, I'm going to look inside and make sure we don't have any debris or spills. The little natural dust, that's always going to be the case because we leave our door ajar. Now we can close our door and do the start to pre-chill the freeze dryer. Now I'll grab the bucket from the back where the hose goes down into to go ahead and dump that out. Here's our 5-gallon bucket that we use, and I'd say there's about, I don't know, a quart and a half of water in there. Can't probably really tell too much, but it doesn't smell, so that's a good sign. There might be a little residue on the sides, but I'll do a quick wipe down and go dump this. All of the water has been dumped out, and that definitely gives us a solid 24 to 48 hours for it to probably dry on its own, because that'll be the amount of time it takes before there's new water in here. Which leaves me the perfect amount of time to go get our food while it's continuing to pre-chill. We'll try to do a quick go over of the food that we have for our cycle today. As I mentioned, our tray of pineapple from our previous cycle that we did. Once we got that coconut, we had to omit the tray, and this will be added to our cycle today. And I know it'll turn out well, but I'm not sure how or what we're going to do with this, if it'll be for pantry or for shelf storage. We are to find out. The other two trays that I have here are not just for us. We will be sharing these with some family and friends. They are lemons, which we have done several times, and I think that they turn out great. They are so diverse. We actually used them in a recipe just last night, and Brad cooked up some perch. If you caught the video about him going out for some ice fishing while he was on a work trip in Idaho, we crushed up some of the lemon, peel and all, and added it to the breading, and it was delicious. It added just the perfect amount of citrus with that pop of lemon. I definitely recommend adding it to your recipes if you haven't tried that yet. And the other tray has green onions that I said we'll be sharing. We have completely used the green onions that we have done already, so I'm definitely excited to have more and to share more. It's really fulfilling to do this and share the outcome of the food and let people try it. And of course, explaining and doing all the things that we're doing, I love it. And I can't wait to do more of gifting and just letting people see what this process is like and what the food tastes like. It's pretty cool. So we will be completing, I think this is about 4 bunches that I did. I didn't hold back, tried to pile it in because it's nice and light. Shared on that tray, and our top tray here are some chicken stock cubes. I used our super cubes again, and this is chicken stock that I made earlier last week, and it turned out fantastic. I do have a couple things that I would change doing this in the future, which I hope to, is once I made the stock, I let it cool and put it into jars. Of course, when I refrigerated them for the night, trying to decide what I wanted to do for sure, that separated the fat and the, let's just say, the stock broth part, which is fine. When you're going to use it for a recipe, it all kind of melds together anyway. But when you want to do it for this process, you can't reincorporate that fat very well. And we have another friend that is doing very similar processes with their freeze dryer, and they said they had a not good outcome with stock when they had that separation. So my thought would be, if you're doing stock or broth, whatever, as soon as you're done making it, divide it into whatever you want to freeze it into, unless you want to put it on a whole tray, and freeze it immediately before it has time to separate, cool, and freeze in 2 different types. Doing it quickly, I think, will be a better option, and that fat would be more dispersed, so it would freeze dry better, but we'll only find that out once we get to do it. I also didn't want to make these too big when we did our tomato sauce, I think. I did it in half-cup increments. It was way too much, it was way too thick, and we then had to stop the cycle, add more time, cut them up into smaller pieces. I'm hoping, because this is more just like liquid, it will turn out better, but we will see. And on that top tray shared is the most delicious chicken and dumplings that I think I have ever made. I don't think there's many dumplings because we ate them all, but there are delicious ingredients of peas, carrots, onions, and of course chicken. But it would make a fantastic addition for chicken pot pie without that. I am still on the hunt for the perfect dumpling recipe, as lots of them call for Bisquick, but we don't use that. So if you have any insight on good recipes, please let me know. I'm looking for a nice, dense dumpling, not too light and fluffy. I know, I grew up on Cracker Barrel too much, so it's hard to get that idea out of my mind. But our freeze dryer is done with its cool down, so we'll get all this food in and start our cycle. Close our door, close our drain valve, and press continue. I look forward to sharing the outcome of how the food turns out, and I'll be doing some thinking on other ideas and ways to use some of the items that we have going in, but a lot of it is just good for pantry use and that last minute addition to a recipe. I hope that you are taking away tons of things as we do this, and if you have other ideas or recommendations, please let us know. But for now, I'm going to go upstairs, start dinner myself, and we will check back on all of our food tomorrow. It's the next day, it's 17 hours later, and our freeze dryer is signaling it's done, and this is the second time it's done that. It actually cycled through and completed a few hours ago while Brad was down here and did a little check for me. He added some more time to make it work a little bit better with our schedule today, and that's one of the things that I love about the freeze dryer. You can't speed up a cycle, but you can make it last a little longer to make it work with what you need to for the day within means. So we will waste no more time. We'll move over to the freeze dryer, release the pressure, open the door, check, make sure our food is dry, and start the packaging so I can get outside and enjoy the beautiful day that we have ahead. So upon a quick investigation, our food is actually not done. There is maybe a little bit too much mixture of things that are too high in moisture versus things that don't have as much moisture. So I'm not sure what the situation is, but upon checking, the chicken and dumplings looks nice and dry, but it is a little thicker, so not as easy to tell without breaking it apart and looking. But all of our broth cubes, our 4 broth cubes that I did, are not dry. So I went ahead and flipped each one of them. A good portion of them is, and I think it will work if it has more time added. But our lemons, our green onions, those feel nice and dry, but our pineapple, not done, and the broth, like I said. So we were not overloaded on our trays. There was tons of space, so I'm not concerned about that factor, but at this point it might be because of the difference in moisture. So something that we are learning and still working through those kinks. I'm still deciding if we're going to package up some of the stuff or just leave it all in there and continue on to check back on it in a few hours, but I will show you what we are dealing with so you can learn from our mistakes and the things that we are trying and experimenting with. So here is our chicken and dumplings and part of our chicken broth. As you can see, there's a lot of different color here. That middle part that's darker, that would be where it's still ice cold and pretty solid. The outer, you can tell it started to dry and kind of powder up a little bit. I had flipped these, so this is now the bottom that was in there, but I'm thinking that I'm going to have to break these pieces to make them smaller so more area can get to drying this. But I feel like the chicken and dumplings are done, but I'm going to leave them in there because it is thicker items, so you would rather be safe than sorry and just make sure it's all dry. So I went ahead and broke those pieces up. We might be dealing with the difference of fat versus liquid. I'm not sure because touching it, it was kind of gummy. So we could just be in the in-between stages of it being completed, or it might not work. So I'm going to stick this tray back in, we'll pull out our next and go from there. A quick look at the pineapple. As you can see, it is definitely smaller, but a lot of the pieces are kind of gummy still. You can bend them, and that's not what you want. You want them hard because they are completely dry. So this is definitely going back in. Our beautiful lemons, I just love them. They make me so happy. It's like the sun, just like today. But I am going to let these stick in there for the remainder of the cycle process. I found one small culprit that felt a little cold still, and if there's one, there could be more that I miss, and I just want to make sure, because of course we are going to be sharing these, so they too will be going back in. Our last tray of green onions and the remainder of our chicken broth. I will be doing the same thing, breaking up these pieces, and as you can see, they are darker in the center with that lighter color on the outside. It's really interesting feeling. Like I mentioned, that could be more of the fat. I'm not really sure since I've not done this before, but we will kind of continue on to see. But breaking them is the best bet that we have at it succeeding because they're just in a solid bar form still, and you need it to be smaller as I'm continuing to see. Our onions feel really nice and dry, but just like the lemons, I'm going to keep them in. I think I've decided we're just going to do all of it and make sure 100% it's complete. It's so weird. It just is like squishy and bendy. It's very thin, easy to break, but it's not done yet. Our smaller pieces going to go back in now. It reminds you to reclose the drain valve and press continue. I went ahead and added 4 more hours. I'm not sure if that's enough time or if it's more than what we need, but we'll find out very soon. And we also might take the suggestion that I talked about earlier, call it an omen, but you can do a time dry weight check. And as I think I described yesterday when we were starting the cycle, that's when you take your food out, you weigh it, put it back in, run it for a few more hours or whatever amount of time that you're looking at, and when that time has run out, you weigh it again. If your product continues to lose weight each time, you know it's still pulling moisture. It's a very logical way to do it. I'm not sure if I have the time today to just keep checking this freeze dryer every 2 hours, so I might just add more time on and go from there if the food still looks the way it does. But I will report back with what we're doing and share our hopeful outcome of positivity and it being done here soon. But once again, we are learning together. We're back downstairs at 7 hours later, and I'm hoping that the additional time we added was more than what we needed to ensure everything is nice and crispy. But when we were coming up on our 4-hour mark, we were still outside having fun, and I decided to add 3 more hours to get us past cleanup, dinner, and more cleanup. So we are down here now. We'll repeat our processes by releasing the pressure, opening the door, and seeing what everything looks like now. First tray that we pulled out last time, and first tray again, our chicken and dumpling and our chicken broth. At first glance, I'm still a little nervous about that chicken broth, and if it's not dry, I don't know if I'm going to continue on, because it might just be a wash when it comes to doing it. I'm going to think about it still. But our chicken and dumplings feel even lighter than what they were, and to me breakage is a good sign of the dryness. So though that was a close call, I'm glad to see that it did that. I'm just glad it stayed on the tray. Our broth, let's see, is still cold. Again, we have another section where it's darker in the center. Some of it might be okay. I'm not entirely sure, but we will kind of get into that as we go. I am going to check our pineapple and the green onion tray because that had the other broth on it. Our pineapple looks like it shrank up a little bit more, and it feels much better. It feels perfect compared to where we were at. So I'm glad to report that maybe the broth was the culprit of too much and too thick of product to put in there. I still really want to try it again, but I might just need to do way thinner bits of it and maybe break it up into smaller pieces. Definitely will be experimenting more, but this looks good, so I'm going to go ahead and put this back in while we look at our last tray that was the issue. Well, as before, our onions looked great and felt great, so now they're just extra dry. Our broth on here feels a little, well, that one's a little damp still. Let's see how this one goes. That one is still a little, I don't know where the perfect spot is, maybe like right there. It's a little sticky in the center, but the outside definitely feels a lot better. So I'm going to keep our unit on for the time being while I still think about how we're going to handle this. But all of our items are done, so we'll start packaging those up for now. We're going to start off with our easy peasy lemons. They were 99% done before. Now they're 110% done. They're nice and crispy, so that's perfect. And we'll package some for our friend for their new home to try, and some for us for whatever's left over. nice and fast, and our 2 jars for our lemons for friends and for us. Our next tray we'll do is our pineapple, as it was partially done, now hopefully completely done, as I keep and continue to check through. Everything feels good, just the way I want it, nice and free of moisture, so now we can package it up. Nice tight fit here with a couple pieces that I took, but a full jar of pineapple. And now going for our onions, since I can verify for sure that those are done. These look like they are going to be a perfect fit for the 2 containers that we have, which is fantastic and gets us a nice hefty load of new green onions for toppings and other things we're using for, since we went through them so quickly the last time. Now we have 2 more to add. Onto the pesky chicken broth that I'm still mulling over what to do, because it's such a small amount of food. I mean, there's this much amount on another tray in there still, but to continue to have this cycle for that long, I don't know if that's the right move, but it would be fun to see it get completed, because right now it's not. You can see the darkness. I know the light kind of whites it out a little bit, but where that darkness is, it's still cold, wet, and not done. The outside of it feels almost like cotton candy, like, I don't know, it smushes. It does have a little bit of crumble, so like I said, I'm not sure if that was like fat. This piece is much closer to being done. As you can see, it has different layers, but the inside is now white in addition. This one, similar, but still cold. And then this one's, I'd say, the closest one to doing it. I don't like to give up on things, and I would like to see it through. So I am leaning towards having the cycle continue and making the finale of this still yet to come, because I do want to know if it's something that's worth pursuing or trying again at least one more time, but in smaller amounts. So I'm going to stick this tray back in and get our last tray, that's chicken broth and the chicken and dumplings. Our last tray here, as we are recollecting of our broken pieces that almost took a dive to the ground, and our other bit of chicken broth that might now be stuck to the tray. So we will go ahead and package up the broth as I still stew over the broth. We're going to go ahead and use a Mylar bag for some storage. As I pick this up, I'm just going to break it into smaller pieces just to confirm that our middle is done. It feels good so far. Down that center is the area where my concern is the most, and it feels good. So I feel confident that this did lose weight. I can just tell by the way it feels now from when I felt it when we took it out the first time. So I'm glad that we let it go back in. Set that aside for now, and now we'll address our chicken broth. So once again, our pieces are and have gotten very small, but are still cold and like kind of gooey to the touch. I wish I had a towel. This one is just a disaster. Like, still, it's, yeah. Kind of same situation right here. And this is the one that got kind of stuck to the board. So you get that crumble. It's definitely a messy situation. So I'm not really pleased with how that's turning out. It's a little frustrating because a lot of time and energy went into creating the broth, and seeing it just kind of fail is disappointing, to say the least. But I don't know what to do. I have decided that I'm going to end the cycle. I know I will regret this at another point because I would like to see it continue through, but we have one of those official fails. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to try this again and do it a little differently, but this did not turn out very well. I am surprised. I know that I've seen people do chicken stock before, so I'm not sure if they did their own, like made their own, or if it's store-bought from a container. That's definitely a little different and not as much fat content as what we have here. So we'll go ahead and turn the machine off while we finish packaging our things after I wash my hands. Well, defeated doesn't even begin to describe how I feel. I hate that I canceled it, but also know that I'm pretty sure it's the right decision, because the limited amount that we had in there to continue to run it for another possibly 12 hours by the time I could get around to it is not really worth it in my mind. And I feel better thinking and talking about it to try a different way of doing this. And you know, the next time we do and stock up on some chicken broth that we're making, I will do my idea of, instead of letting it cool in the fridge first and then dividing it out, will be to just freeze it immediately in smaller amounts. However that will be, we'll see, but I'm hoping that that will work. And maybe between now and then I'll also do a little research. And if you have done homemade chicken stock before and freeze dried it in your freeze dryer, please let me know if you were successful and how you were, what you did, how long it took, all of these things. I have many questions. So, but now we can turn back to our chicken and dumplings, and I'm going to get an oxygen absorber out, put that in, and get our impulse sealer down to seal it up. Change it to a 7/8 setting. That's about the highest setting. And make sure we are clear for the sealer to go across. And as usual, my multiple seals to ensure that it is packaged correctly. And it looks good. So our packaging is complete. Now we'll go ahead and reseal our oxygen absorber bag to keep our others safe until we need them. As usual, turn it back down to that 4 to 5 range. And we're all resealed there. And as I said in our previous video for freeze drying, that I always like to double bag our oxygen absorbers to give them the best chance possible to make sure that they stay moisture and oxygen free. Now that our packaging is complete, I can move on to the last thing I wanted to do in the video, because I can't believe it's finally done. Our oil filtration from our cleaning and maintenance video from weeks ago. I actually can't even tell you how long this took, but I don't feel like it should have taken this long. I'm also not sure what we could have done incorrectly, because it's a plug and play filter that goes in the top. Needless to say, it is done now, and I guess we can move on from this and just know that either we'll find a method that works in the future, or it's just going to take forever. But I figured now we can use the container that we reserved to pour it back in and label it so we know when it's from. I'm hoping this part is easier than the length it took to get it to happen. So that was nice and easy, quick and simple, opposite of the process before it. And we'll go ahead and label this with the date of today. Well, our video has come to a close with several items that we have to show for it, with our chicken and dumpling that we get to add to the long-term shelf storage. That's always something very exciting for me, even though we didn't get to complete the chicken broth, which would have a perfect spot right here in a jar for us to use on a regular basis and try. but I am bound and determined to figure it out. So please drop us a comment if you have had success with it and how you did it, and all the other answers to the questions I had before, because I want to know, and I know it would be a great addition for our house for cooking so many different things. But I am very happy with the items that we did get done to share with our friends and family. It makes my heart happy to do things like that, and I hope that they enjoy these products as much as we do at our home. And of course, checking off another thing on our list, finally, to complete our cleaning and maintenance video, of having the oil filter. But if you enjoyed the content that you saw in this video and things like it, and you would like to be notified when future videos are set to premiere or post, please consider subscribing to our channel and you'll be notified when that happens. But until then, we hope that you're doing well, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye!